Well, you are building AI automation workflows and some of the workflows have started suddenly failing. You might want to trace those errors. You might want to load the error data and replicate what the issue is happening so that you can fix them. You might as well want to retry the failed execution in case of some sort of temporary error, or you might want to roll back the entire workflow to a previous working state. Welcome to my course on AI automation powered by n8n. In the last lesson of this section 4 of this course, we talked about some of the basic concepts of error handling, debugging, troubleshooting. Today in this lesson, we are going to see some of the features which are available to you in n8n interface that are going to help you a lot in fixing your workflows whenever they are erroring out. So the first feature of n8n that comes to my mind when dealing with errors or handling these errors in your workflows is debug in editor, that allows you to copy the failed execution into your canvas, allowing you to troubleshoot these errors without rerunning or reloading the data for your workflows. Now let's go to the screen share and see this debug in editor feature in action. So I'm logged into the cloud instance of my n8n workspace and I'm currently in workflow 5 connecting different apps. You might have seen this workflow in section 2 of this course. If you have not watched that lesson, you can go back and check how we built this workflow. However, in this lesson, we are going to deliberately fail it and then use the features which are available in n8n to troubleshoot these errors, fix some of them, and see what else we can do with other features that are available for you to troubleshoot and debug issues in your AI automation workflows. So this workflow is expecting some data or webhook to be called. So let me first execute this workflow so that our webhook starts listening. So now you can see that waiting for trigger event, which is more like webhook is waiting to be called, and I know that this workflow is listening for a user registration event or user registration form submission. So I have this form over here. Let me click another response. So let's add the details over here. So I'll add Sharma, my travel blog email, company I'll just say GenAI, Unplugged, and then role, let's have it developer. And let's go back, and still this event is being listened over here and still this webhook is listening. So I just wanted to double ensure that. Let's go ahead and submit this and come back over here. So the form is submitted. So you can see that data has been received and it is running something in Google Sheets, and then filter, then Slack, and oops, the error has occurred over here in the SES node. Now let's just assume that we had activated this workflow. This workflow was live in production and somebody submitted this particular data where this error has occurred. So how do we go about solving, debugging this error? Let's first clear the execution over here. Let's click on this cross. I've just cleared everything to avoid any kind of confusion. Let me refresh it as well. So you can see that now our workflow is clean. There is no error over here. Now let's go ahead and trace the error that we injected earlier in the run. For that, let's go to the home tab. In the overview landing page, it is showing some sort of data related to production execution, failed production execution, failure rate, time saved, average runtime as well. At the bottom, you can see workflow, credential, and execution. Execution is where the execution log exists. So I'll click on this, and here at the top, you can see the workflow 5 connecting different apps. That is the one where the workflow had error, and you can see the status is error, started on this time, ran for this many seconds, and execution ID was this, and it was a test instance because we manually triggered it and then submitted the form and then let the error happen. So let's click on this one, and this is going to open the execution that happened for this workflow, and you can see there are other executions as well. Some were passed, some were failed, and this is where the error came, and you saw that this was the error problem in Node AWS SES bad request. Please check your parameters. So in the last lesson, I have already detailed out all these concepts, how you can come to this execution log, what you can see, what you can get. But for this lesson, let's talk about an important feature which exists over here that we did not talk about, debug in editor. So if I click on debug in editor, what it is going to do is, right now everything you can see that I cannot change anything. If I go back over here and click on this one, you can see that there is input, you can see the output is there, but I cannot make any changes over here. Now let's go back and see what the error is. So if I click on this, it is telling me that filter node.item.json user email, and it is telling that it is missing some sort of a domain. And if we look at the filter node, you can see that the email is clearly mentioned and there is @ as well. So what is the problem? So the problem that I see over here is the property it is referring is user email, whereas this node has email in it. So that means we have to edit our AWS SES node, and this execution log or execution that we have loaded is not allowing us to edit and retry or check our changes. So we'll need to go back to the canvas and click on this debug in editor button. So when I click on it, it is going to load the entire workflow with all the data that was there that caused the error. So it becomes very easy, very fast for me now that I can click on this AWS SES. Now everything you see is in editable mode. I can make any kind of changes, and over here you can clearly see that there is no property called user email, but somehow that got mentioned over here. So in order to fix it, what we have to do is dot email, and then if we run it, it has now caused another type of error that says email address is not verified. So it seems like this from email address no reply at GenAI is not verified. So in order to fix that, I'm going to use another domain. Now let's try to execute this step. Alright, so it succeeded. So you saw that 2 error came in. We were able to load the error data that was there in that simulated kind of prod execution that we had. We went to the execution log, we loaded the failed execution, and then we clicked on debug in editor, which allowed us to use the same erroneous data that was there. So that was our first feature of n8n that you can use or leverage while troubleshooting or debugging errors in your automation workflows. Now let's talk about a situation where you are facing an error that is temporary in nature. Sometimes your workflows are failing, sometimes the workflows are not failing. Maybe you are calling some external API that is erroring out, that is not available at that moment, or temporarily the service was down. There was some sort of a glitch for some milliseconds or some seconds or maybe some minutes, but all that caused failure in your AI automation workflow. Then what shall you do? Well, in such situations, we saw that there is a retry mechanism at every node that you can basically configure. However, if you have not configured it, or maybe you have configured it but the retries were 3-5 seconds apart, how about the service came back online like 1 minute after? So all your 5 seconds, like 15 seconds, 3 retries happened, but the service came back online after 1 minute. In that case as well, the execution log will continue to say that your workflow failed and it will be in the error state. But then next morning, the same workflow is running successfully. However, there was a crucial piece of data in that one run that was not processed, and you would like to do that. So how do you retry that exact execution out there? So for such scenarios as well, n8n has a retry feature that you can use in order to retry the failed execution. And how do you access it? Well, if we go back to our canvas, let's go back to the home screen. Let's save these changes that we made. Now let's go back to the execution. So now you can see our workflow 5 is success because we have corrected the error. However, if I click on this one again, and you would see that the failed execution has opened, and in case this was a temporary error, maybe this AWS SES service was down for a minute or so, then what you can do is just next to the debug in editor, there is this button called retry execution. This is the one that you will be clicking in order to retry it. And when you click on it, these two options appear. Either you can retry with currently saved workflow from node with error, or you can retry with original workflow again from node with error. The first option, retry with current workflow, is going to run the failed execution with your latest workflow changes, while retry with original workflow is going to run exactly the same execution as it was at the time of the failure. So if we retry with the original workflow, this is again going to fail. So you can see that another execution log has been created with an error state. However, if I click on this and let's say retry with currently saved workflow, let's do that. Now it should succeed, and you can see that it has successfully executed the workflow because we had made changes in it, saved it, and that's how you can retry the execution or your workflow with the updated changes that you made in order to fix the errors. So this retry feature ensures that you do not lose any sort of data while fixing errors, as it picks up things where exactly they were left off. Now the third important feature that is available in n8n is workflow version history. So what does this workflow version history do? Well, every time you modify or save your workflow, n8n maintains a a copy or a version of the previous workflow that you had. This allows you to roll back to a previous state of the workflow, previous developed workflow that you had created. Maybe that was running successful for you, but after some changes, there are some unexpected results, unexpected outputs that started coming. So you can basically go back to the previously created version of your workflow. So how do you do that? Let's get to the screen share. Let's continue to use this workflow 5 of ours. Let's go back to the personal project over here. Let's go to the n8n course. Should be workflow 5 somewhere over here. All right, you can see workflow 5. Let's open this one. So this is the one that we fixed. Let's open this one and see what we fixed over here. First, we made this change of discoverwithdheeraj.com, and also we made a fix with the email over here. Earlier, it was user email that was mentioned that was failing this particular workflow. Now, in order to access the version history of this particular workflow, what you can do is just next to this shared and saved button, there is this button that says workflow history to view and restore previous versions of your workflow. If I click on this one, it is going to load all the changes that I have made in the entire day, and you can see at the bottom that version history is limited to 1 day only. So whatever changes I'm making in this particular workflow for today's date, that is going to be available only because that's the plan I am using right now. If you want to have access to the full version history, you can click on this upgrade plan over here. It is going to take you to the plan sections and you can choose any other plan, and over here you can see that I am currently at the starter plan that only supports 1 day workflow history. However, in this plan, which is of $60 a month, you can use 5-day workflow history as well. But let's go back to our workflow and load the previous state of this workflow. So you can see this is the latest saved version that we had that does not have any kind of error now. Now this one was like in the morning around 9 a.m. and here the action button has come up. If I click on it, these are the actions which are available. Either I can restore this version, we can clone to a new workflow, we can open the version in new tab, or we can download it and import it. And at the bottom you see there are 2 nodes, orphan nodes lying somewhere over here. That is why we are seeing a zoomed out version of it. Let me click on this one and see. Now this one is fine if I click on this one. So this one had a user email. So this is the one that we corrected, not the earlier one. So if I click on this, I can restore this version. So if I restore this version, it is asking for the confirmation because it is going to replace the current version that is there. If I click on restore, now you can see successfully restored the workflow version. Let's go back and find out. So once I have clicked it, let me open this node and you can see that the misconfiguration that we had over here, json.user email, has appeared again, and my domain of the from email has also been reverted from discoverwithdheeraj.com to GenAI So let's go back and change this as well again. So let's come over here and now let's open this one and let's see if this is the one that was corrected. Yes, this is the one that was corrected one. So let me just revert it to this one. So that ways you can use this restore workflow version in order to revert to something that was earlier working. Of course, it depends upon the plan that you are on. I am on the starter plan, so I can access only 1 day history. So if I made some sort of mess in one single day, I can clean that up by going to this version history and restoring it to the old state. However, if you have more like a pro plan, you can go till 5 days and clean up any kind of issues that you might have created in your automation workflows. So this version history feature allows you to play with your workflows, test out new ideas, and always roll back to the version that was very much working for you. Now the fourth and final thing that I wanted to talk in this lesson is about how you can fix the recurring issues that are coming in your workflows. Well, there are a couple of ways in n8n to handle the recurring issues. Let's open one of our workflows that we were working in the previous lesson, the last lesson of this course, and try to fix some of the recurring issues that we expect in that particular workflow. Now let's see what else we could have done it in this workflow in order to prevent these kinds of issues. So if you look at, let's zoom in a bit. So in the webhook, we are receiving some data. This data is already pinned and you can see that I have received first name, last name, email, company, and role. Email is currently coming fine. But what if this email was empty? What if this email was not structured properly? What would have happened is that by the time it reaches the AWS SES node, which is sending out the email, it will be too late and our AWS SES node is going to fail because there is no email that the user mentioned. You have couple of options for it. What we can do is over here, let me disconnect this and let's add if node over here. So basically we are putting some sort of validation, and we are saying that if this email is not empty, then we continue our workflow. So this workflow gets continued if the email is not empty. So I need to connect this true branch over here. Let me format it. So now what it means is that it is going to check if there is email or not. If the email is there, then only rest of the workflow is going to execute. So that means this node of AWS SES, which is sending out the email, is not going to fail in case the empty email is mentioned. Same way you can add another condition in your if node that also checks not just the empty email string but also the format of it, whether it looks like a spam email or not. All those checks and balances in the form of validation you can put in place before these nodes are executed that you think might fail if the data is inputted incorrectly into them. But this validation is not enough for you. Why? Because it is silently failing the workflow in the background. Although you are not seeing, you are seeing always that workflow is succeeding, but actually it is silently failing in case some invalid data is coming from the forms. It could be okay in some of the scenarios, but it may not be okay in some of the scenarios where you expect the data to come but it is not coming. So in such scenarios, what you can do is you can attach something to the false branch where your validation is failing. And what could be that something? Maybe you can add a Google Sheet node. So I can add a Google Sheet node over here and create a spreadsheet or just append a row into a sheet. So if I'm maintaining all the error logs in some sort of a Google Sheet, I can use the Google Sheet node to log that error that a form was submitted, but this was the data that we received on so and so time, such and such date. So that's one way of dealing it inside your workflow. But n8n provides a much more smarter and much more elegant way to handle these errors in terms of error workflows. And how you can trigger error workflow is by going back to the canvas, and instead of logging the issue over here, I will delete this and I will add a stop and error node. So we can click on this and I'll leave the settings as is for now. So basically now if I format our workflow, this looks like that as soon as data is received, it validates whether the invalid email is present or not. If the valid email is present, format is correct, rest of the workflow executes with the highest probability that AWS SES node, which is sending out email, is not going to fail, not going to cause any kind of error. And in case the validation has failed, it is going to stop our workflow and raise an error. And what does it actually do? Let's see it in action in the next lesson of this course, where I am going to explain what are error workflows, how you can configure them, how you can trigger them, and what is the configuration of this stop and error node looks like. We'll talk in detail about all these things in the next lesson of this course. So stay tuned and I'll see you in the next lesson.